Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today. You know, if you've spent any time at all in a modern workplace, you've probably realized that figuring out the whole collaboration thing can sometimes feel like, well, like trying to solve a giant puzzle in the dark. But today, we're going to flip the switch and shed some serious light on how we actually work together. We're breaking down the fascinating dynamics of organizational groups and teams. So let's just jump right in.
I want you to think about your office for a second, or your next Zoom call, and ask yourself a really honest question. Are you in a work group or are you in a work team? Because people use those two terms interchangeably literally all the time, right? But here's the thing, there is a massive difference. They are definitely not the same thing. Being in a group is a totally different ballgame than being in a true team. And honestly, knowing the difference can completely change how you approach your daily work.
So here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll start with the nature of groups, then we'll look at the power of teams. After that, we'll put groups versus teams head to head, and we'll wrap up with the 5 developmental stages of getting there.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the nature of groups and their foundational dynamics.
At its absolute foundation, what is a group? Well, it's really just 2 or more individuals who communicate with one another, share some sort of collective identity, and have a common goal. Notice how I didn't say anything about how big it is? That's because size doesn't matter here. You could have a group of 3 or you could have a group of 50. As long as those folks are talking, recognizing themselves as a unit, and aiming at a shared objective, boom, you've got a group. But as we're going to see in a minute, not all groups are created equal.
Inside any organization, groups generally split into 2 main buckets, formal and informal. Formal groups are the ones deliberately set up by management to hit specific company goals. Think of things like a permanent audit committee or maybe a temporary project task force. On the flip side, we've got informal groups, and these just pop up naturally, mostly because we're human. It could be a tight-knit clique hanging out by the water cooler or folks bonding because they went to the same college. These informal groups are actually super important because they reduce workplace uncertainty and give people a real sense of belonging.
Moving right along to Section 2, the power of teams and structured commitment.
Now, I absolutely love this quote because it brilliantly captures what a team actually is. It defines a team as a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, a set of performance goals, and an approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Did you catch the magic words in there? Complementary skills and mutually accountable. You aren't just a random collection of people who happen to share the same job title. You are a carefully interlocked puzzle of different strengths, holding each other's feet to the fire to actually achieve a shared mission.
And in today's world, these teams take on a few different forms. First up, you have self-managed work teams. These guys are highly autonomous. They don't just do the daily grind, they actually take on supervisory stuff like scheduling, assigning tasks, controlling their own workflow. It's pretty cool. Then there are cross-functional teams. This is when you pull together employees from the exact same hierarchical level, but totally different departments just to solve one specific problem. And finally, of course, virtual teams. These connect workers all over the globe who might literally never meet face-to-face, but they're tightly knit together through the internet and video calls to get the job done.
Which brings us to Section 3, groups versus teams, a clear distinction.
If you really want to grasp how your own workplace ticks, you have to look at the stark differences between these two side by side. In a standard work group, you've got a strong, very clearly focused leader who just delegates tasks. Accountability is strictly on the individual, and you are producing individual work. Group meetings? They are heavily focused on efficiency. Basically, a group discusses, decides, and then delegates. But a team? Oh, a team is totally different. They actually share leadership roles. Accountability is both individual and mutual. The stuff you produce is collective, meaning you either succeed or you fail together. And team meetings aren't just about speeding through an agenda. They're about open-ended discussion and active problem solving. A team discusses, decides, and then actually does the real work together. So remember this, all work teams are groups, but not all groups are work teams.
Let's dive into Section 4, the 5 developmental stages, moving from a group to a team.
Okay, so now that we know what a high-performing, deeply integrated team looks like, how do we actually build one? Transforming a basic group of people into a mutually accountable team is a psychological journey, and studies show it happens through a very predictable evolution of human behavior across 5 specific stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and finally, adjourning. Let's walk through exactly what happens to our brains at each step of this roadmap.
Stage 1 is forming. And look, we've all been here. It is that slightly awkward, anxious kickoff meeting for a brand new project.
Everyone feels like they're operating in a vacuum because nobody quite knows what to expect yet or what's really expected of them. The whole focus here is just on safety and making sure you're accepted by everyone else. People are kind of keeping their heads down. So to push past this stage, leaders absolutely have to step up. They need to accelerate the introductions, maybe do some startup activities or social event, and they have to clearly communicate the goals and individual roles just to cut through all that initial anxiety.
Once people start feeling a little more comfortable, boom, we hit stage 2, storming. This is where the gloves come off. Members start challenging the leader, and they challenge each other over goals and roles. People are jockeying for position within the hierarchy. Disagreements bubble up, and you might even see some subgroups or coalitions starting to form. Now, here is the really interesting part. Conflict here is not a sign of failure. It's actually completely necessary and entirely necessary. Clashing egos are just a required step for the group to break free from being totally dependent on the leader. That being said, the storming phase can absolutely destroy a group if it isn't handled right. Surviving this storm takes a very specific kind of leadership. The leader has to see what's happening and stay incredibly calm. They need to use active listening so everybody feels like they're being heard in a reasonable way. Then, they have to reestablish their leadership by clarifying those objectives again. And most importantly, leaders have to squash any hidden agendas or toxic office politics. You know those situations where everyone in the room knows there's a problem, but nobody wants to actually confront it? Yeah, you can't have that. You have to let the group push through the conflict, not just avoid it.
If you manage to navigate that storm successfully, you finally reach the sweet relief of stage 3, norming. This is where the conflict gives way to actual cohesion. Trust and cooperation just skyrocket. The group starts building up structures and a hierarchy of rules that'll actually help them achieve their goals. The focus shifts totally away from all that personal drama and becomes deeply task-oriented. And because of this shift, the leader's role fundamentally changes too. They stop being so directive and become much more consultative. It's about being as democratic as possible, asking people what to do rather than telling them.
All of that hard work brings us to stage 4, performing. This is the ultimate goal, the absolute climax of our journey. This phase captures the very best of people's abilities working together. We're talking maximum productivity and efficiency here. The team is just humming along, getting things done seamlessly by relying on all those norms and structures they've fought so hard to build back in the earlier phases. They aren't just a group anymore, right? They are a bona fide, high-performing team.
But, as we know, all good things must eventually come to an end. Stage 5 is adjourning. Now, this is mostly for temporary groups and teams, and it happens when the assignment is totally wrapped up. It's about disengaging from the relationships and terminating the tasks. It's a time to recognize what you've achieved and say your personal goodbyes. Interestingly enough, this final stage often triggers a minor sense of crisis or apprehension for folks. It's kind of a melancholic phase, really, because team members are having to surrender this powerful sense of inclusion that they work so incredibly hard to build.
Now, a quick reality check. Hitting that peak performing stage does not happen overnight. Assuming a team doesn't hit any massive roadblocks, you can usually expect the first 2 to 3 months to just be dealing with the anxiety of forming and the heavy conflict of storming. It really isn't until the 4th or 5th month that the norming phase kicks in and trust finally solidifies. And honestly, it usually takes until month 6 or 7 to truly hit that highly efficient performing phase. It takes a lot of patience, proper leadership, and just a basic understanding that you cannot rush human psychology.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Tomorrow at work, I want you to take a real, hard look around at the people you collaborate with. Look at your meetings, your shared goals, your day-to-day communication. Are you just a formal group, passing around delegated tasks? Are you stuck in a storm of hidden agendas? Or are you actively leaning into the process, sharing the leadership, and building a mutually accountable high-performing team? That choice and that entire dynamic is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you next time.